Okie dokie. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Dun 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 Chernobyl Day. Oh my goodness, Chernobyl was quite a crazy time to be alive. So we're going to talk a little bit of details about Chernobyl. It's actually quite complex exactly what happened, but we're going to have a brief introduction to it because I feel like everyone has heard of Chernobyl and the nuclear fallout and all this crazy stuff. So we're going to go into a little bit more details with it today. So please make sure you are filling out that document that goes along with this PowerPoint. So make sure you're working on that. But let's go ahead and get started here with talking about where is Chernobyl. Now Chernobyl, it's not running anymore. This was located in Ukraine. So this was part of the USSR back in the 60s and stuff. So this is 56 miles north of Kiev, which is Ukraine's capital. So in this image here, this is Kiev, and there's Chernobyl. And one thing that's kind of interesting is that Chernobyl is actually right along this river, which gives lots of water to Kiev, which a lot of people there, it's the capital, but also goes into the Black Sea and stuff. So maybe not the best place to put one, but you know, USSR, kind of a crazy time there. But anyway, it's located in Ukraine, and yes, you can still go to it. You probably have to sign all these waivers and stuff, but the city was founded in 1193. That is super old. All of our cities in the United States, it's like established in 1920, and we're like, wow, that's old. But this one, 1193, so it's a very, very old city. It was disestablished in 1988. And the reason it was disestablished was because of Chernobyl. So the city had about 14,000 residents living in it during the time. And here's an image of, I mean, it was quite, you know, the family place. There's all these apartments. There is a Ferris wheel. So it was, you know, people lived there. People had lives there. So what happened, right? So 1986, April 26th, which I just realized is coming up soon. Reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl power plant exploded. So basically, there were tests that they were doing, and the reactor just was not well maintained at all. Welcome to the USSR. And the operators lost complete control of the reactor, and they actually couldn't get control of it for 9 days. Okay. So basically, they were just doing a safety test run. They wanted to see what would happen if all the power went out. And so during this test, the safety systems were intentionally shut off. However, due to poor design and poor maintenance, the reaction, an uncontrolled reaction occurred. Now, I don't want you to freak out about all the other types of nuclear reactors that we have today, because they are far more controlled and they are better built. But back in the day of the USSR, they weren't so concerned about that. So there's a design flaw and a reaction occurred. So basically the water that they used to cool off the nuclear material flashed into steam, and it created this huge steam explosion. And if you guys remember from the last chapter, steam has so much energy, right? And it caused an open air graphite fire. So that's fun. So that pencil lead you have is actually quite flammable. And if it catches on fire, big flame. So yeah, steam, graphite fire, all this material shot up into the atmosphere, and like I said, for 9 days until it was finally controlled. But 9 days for all this nuclear stuff to be floating around the atmosphere, it's a long time. So the material traveled to the western parts of the USSR, and it traveled all through Europe. So this was not a little explosion. This was a big deal. Now, if you look more into Chernobyl, and unfortunately Miss Griffiths isn't here because she knows all about Chernobyl. She was like so passionate about Chernobyl. She knows way more about it than many people do. But the USSR was very like, we're perfect and we don't make mistakes. So they didn't tell anyone that this happened. So 9 days, there was all this destructive nuclear material floating around, and they didn't tell anyone. So the steam blast at first caused 2 deaths. So when the first flash of steam happened, 2 people died. Over the next days and weeks, 134 servicemen were hospitalized with radiation poisoning. It's not a good way to go, I'll tell you. Not that I would know, but it doesn't seem very comfortable having your DNA literally destroyed. 28 servicemen died later. Within the people that actually survived, 14 died from cancer. So, and they're probably still being affected by it today. So here is an image of Chernobyl, and we can see this is what blew up, okay? So it was quite a large part of Chernobyl, and it just totally blew up. It's crazy. Like I said, they didn't tell anyone that this happened. So this is considered to be the most disastrous nuclear power plant accident in history, not only because it was really expensive, but also because it caused a lot of injuries. This picture is kind of spooky. I think this is an old school, and you can see that the town was completely abandoned. So the people in the city, they were not told to evacuate for a few hours. So it exploded, all this nuclear stuff is flying around. The people that lived right by it were not told for hours. Finally, a bunch of people started getting sick, and the government was like, oh, hey, maybe we should evacuate people. So it wasn't until a bunch of people got sick and quite a few people died that they decided to evacuate. So the thing, though, is that the government didn't really tell them what was going on. They're just like, hey, we're evacuating. There's a little issue with Chernobyl. It's fine, right? And they're like, you'll be back in 3 days. No big deal. However, most people were never able to return. So they left everything behind. They loaded up on buses, and they never came back. And like I said, you can see here, the town is literally just in ruins. Nature has taken back over the area. So, like mentioned before, the Soviet Union did not share this information because they were like top secret people, you know. So there was another nuclear power plant in Sweden, which was like several thousand miles or hundreds of miles away. And radiation alarms started to go off. And so they tracked the wind patterns and figured out that, hey, it was coming from the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union didn't tell them what was going on. So they were like, hey, Soviet Union, we're having all this radiation coming to Sweden. Like, you know what's going on? They're like, no, it's fine. Nothing happened. Your instruments just must be faulty. And so Sweden did more tests, and they're like, those guys lied to us. And they're like, we're going to do a thorough investigation. And that's when the Soviet Union was like, okay, sorry. Yeah, one of our nuclear reactors blew up. But no one really knew what the extent of it was for a really long time, because once again, Soviet Union was very secretive, and they wanted to put on that persona that, hey, look at all this awesome stuff we're doing, and we're awesome, and everything's great here. But in reality, it was not. Their nuclear power plants were not built well at all. And they actually think there were probably other nuclear reactors that went off or that exploded as well during the time of the Soviet Union. But of course, they didn't tell anyone. So anyway, that's fun. So, lasting effects. If you guys, I'm sure you're familiar, World War II, dropping the bombs of Nagasaki and Hiroshima in Japan. It's estimated that about 400 times more radioactive material was released than both of those atomic bombs combined. So it was a huge amount of radioactive material that was being released. People in Europe, in the Western USSR, were found to have radioactive particles all in their clothing. So it was really bad. Another issue was that the power plant was located to one of the largest surface water systems in Europe, as we saw in that first image. It supplied, at the time, 2.4 million residents in Kiev. And so suddenly their water wasn't clean anymore, the fish became radioactive, and that was quite a staple of food for the people during that time. So it was just a crazy thing. And like I said, most people had no idea what was going on. So most of the trees that were nearby were completely destroyed. A lot of animals died from radiation poisoning or died later from thyroid cancer. I have heard people say that some of the animals there are radioactive still, and that is definitely true. You don't want to pick up a stray dog from Chernobyl, that's for sure. The effects of Chernobyl are expected to stick around for another 100 years. So it's been about, what, 30 something years since this explosion has occurred, and they're still expecting the effects to last for another 100 years. So among the citizens living near Chernobyl, 237 suffered from radiation poisoning, and 31 of which died within 3 months. So it was really sad. Also, a lot of families feared that they were going to have children that were mutated, so there was a huge amount of abortions during that time, which is also really sad. So it did not serve the people well there. They literally had no idea what was going on. They were never able to return back home. Some of them have now in the past couple of years, but it's totally unlivable. And it was just because some people just were not being careful and rushed to make nuclear power plants. But one thing that is the coolest part, my favorite part of Chernobyl, is this thing here called the elephant's foot. So this is like probably the most famous picture of Chernobyl. It is a huge mass, as you can see, of radioactive material. So it's made of silicon dioxide, which in itself isn't significantly dangerous, but it's mixed with uranium, titanium, zirconium, magnesium, graphite. So it's just this big blob of radioactive material. It is extremely radioactive. However, it has decreased the radioactiveness over time. So when it first started, it would have killed someone, given someone a lethal dose of radioactive material within 5 minutes. If you were anywhere near it, it would have killed you in 5 minutes. So to get this picture, they were actually quite far away. The photographers had like this huge, really thick glass in between them and this elephant's foot, and they couldn't stay for long at all because it was so, and it still is, quite radioactive. So it actually ate through 6 feet of lead, walls, piping, all sorts like that. It ate through 6 feet of it to reach its location, as we can see there. They were actually kind of freaked out because they were afraid that it would continue to eat through the building, through the ground, and then hit the groundwater, and that would contaminate the whole area's drinking water, and that would have been really, really bad. But thankfully it did stop before that happened. But yeah, so there you go. There's Chernobyl. Kind of crazy. I do have a video to show you guys if I can get it to work. Oh, here's.
Того дня я прокинувся аж о 9-й, бо напередодні повернувся після вечірньої зміни. Тому одразу заснув і нічного вибуху не чув. Вранці дружина прийшла з базару і сказала, що на станції аварія. Був вибух, загинули люди і що на базарі заборонили продавати зелень і капусту. Я сказав, що такого не може бути. Подивився на вулицю, там поливальні машини мили асфальт і. Колись на ЧАЕС вже була невеличка аварія, тоді теж мили вулиці. Тому я і цього разу не подумав, що це масштабна катастрофа. Я взяв нашу дворічну доньку і пішов гуляти. Я досі вважаю, що це було моєю найбільшою помилкою. На вулицях уже були БТРи з дозиметрами, але офіцери закривали прилади, щоб не було видно показників. Паніки не було. Місто жило звичайним життям. Люди засміхали дитячі. Я дійшов до околиці міста. Звідти було видно ЧАЕС, руїни 4-го реактора. І ось тоді я зрозумів, що відбулося щось страшне. Я схопив дитину і побіг додому. Дома я сказав, на вулицю не виходити, зачинити вікна, мити все розчином марганцівки. Увечері я мав заступити на зміну. Я не сумнівався, що мав це зробити. А хто б тоді локалізував аварію? Я не міг би потім жити з цим. Коли ми їхали повз зруйнований реактор, я побачив його фактично у розрізі. Було зрозуміло, що він дихає в атмосферу, викидаючи величезну масу радіації. Я жахнувся за дітей, за родину. На в'їзді до станції стояли піддони з марганцівкою, мити взуття, щоб не заносити радіацію ззовні. Тобто на вулиці було гірше, ніж усередині. Дивитися на криваві сліди від марганцівки було важко, бо вже було відомо, що загинули люди. Дмитрів нас забрали. Переступати через купи одягу пожежників на підлозі було важко, бо ніби через людей переступаєш. Я увійшов до машинної зали, подивився на дах четвертого. Більшість із кнопок на щиті управління вже не діяли, тому ми відімкнули другий злом, порушуючи інструкції. Але якби ми цього не зробили, то він сам би відімкнувся з іще тяжчими наслідками. Я переконаний, що більшість наказів урядової комісії були помилковими і призводили до збільшення масштабів катастрофи і до безглуздого надлишкового опромінення людей.
All right, guys, so as you saw, that was a pretty crazy thing, and it's interesting to hear firsthand account from someone that actually worked in Chernobyl. So anyway, hope you enjoyed that, and have a great rest of your day.